All right, the president has continued to pile up one massive win after another, ahead, of course, of these all-important midterm elections in 2018 this year. Now, Trump now has an undeniable, amazing record of promises kept and accomplishments. And by the way, every Republican can now run on the things that he's done, and this can no longer be ignored. Now, today in Israel, the president kept a major campaign promise. Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, Steve Mnuchin, other top administration officials unveiled the new embassy in Israel's true capital. It's called Jerusalem. Now, the president emphasized the significance of this historic moment in a video message to the audience. Take a look.
Today, Jerusalem is the seat of Israel's government. It is the home of the Israeli legislature and the Israeli Supreme Court and Israel's prime minister and president. Israel is a sovereign nation with the right, like every other sovereign nation, to determine its own capital. Yet for many years we failed to acknowledge the obvious, the plain reality that Israel's capital is Jerusalem. On December 6, 2017, at my direction, the United States finally and officially recognized Jerusalem as the true capital of Israel. Today we follow through on this recognition and open our embassy in the historic and sacred land of Jerusalem. And we're opening it many, many years ahead of schedule.
And the Israeli prime minister, a man who I've said for many years has incredible moral clarity, Bibi Netanyahu, he also attended this monumental event. And President Trump, he talked about him keeping his word and his promises. Take a look.
Last December, President Trump became the first world leader to recognize Jerusalem as our capital. And today, the United States of America is opening its embassy right here in Jerusalem. Thank you. Thank you, President Trump, for having the courage to keep your promises. Thank you, President Trump, and thank you all for making the alliance between America and Israel stronger than ever.
Now, there's a reason the prime minister and the Israelis are so thankful for President Trump's bold actions. You see, for decades, we've had one U.S. president after another promising over and over and over and over and over again that they were going to open an embassy in Jerusalem, but they never delivered. They repeatedly broke their promises. Now, what we continue to see over and over again is that what the president says he's going to do, he actually does. By the way, it's good politics, too. Keep your word. Now, what happened today in Jerusalem is history in the making. Even Senator Chucky Schumer, he couldn't help but praise President Trump. And he said this move is long overdue. And it was. And, of course, not one single Democrat bothered to attend this event. God forbid they ever support the president, even just a little bit. Remember, Joe Manchin tried to stand for a second. Anyway, now while Israel is celebrating this historical development, Hamas predictably carrying out violent, bloody protests that have led to the deaths now of over 50 Palestinians, over 1,000 injured. Now, these Hamas-inspired protesters, they've been setting things on fire, throwing firebombs and stones at Israeli soldiers. The Israeli military is also saying that 3 of the Palestinians were killed after trying to plant a bomb. The violence is horrific. It's evil in our time. Nobody wants to see it, but it's all too predictable. The media rarely reminds you that the Hamas charter calls for the destruction of the state of Israel. Now, keep in mind, as we have reported right here on this show, Hamas actually pays the families of terrorists that get killed, trying to inflict pain and suffering on Israel and Americans, too. Now, Israel has a right to defend itself, just like Israel has the right for Jerusalem to be their capital. Now, Israel is not the only place where the Trump administration is making serious progress. More developments as it relates to North Korea and Kim Jong-un in what is now the making yet of another concession ahead of his meeting and his summit with President Trump next month in Singapore. Yep, Little Rocket Man is now inviting journalists from all over the world to watch as his country will dismantle their nuclear test site and facilities. Even more evidence that President Trump's peace through strength policy is more than working. Now, you think about this. We have gone from North Korea firing missiles over Japan, threatening Guam, threatening the continental U.S., Hawaii, and the rest of the world. And now we've got Little Rocket Man walking across the DMZ, meeting with South Korea's president, releasing 3 American hostages just last week, and it didn't involve any U.S. cash or cargo planes full of cash. And now the West is invited, and the media is invited, to watch and witness the dismantling of Kim Jong-un's test site. But don't worry, I'm sure the media is talking about Russia, Russia, or Stormy, Stormy. There's one key factor in all of this, and that is the president, President Trump. He forced North Korea's hand. His policy is continuing to work. And tonight, we're also learning new details about some of the issues that will come up at this June meeting. National Security Advisor John Bolton is saying many issues are on the table. Let's take a look.
On the denuclearization side itself, that means all aspects of their nuclear program. Clearly, the ballistic missile program, as with Iran, with the intention of being a delivery system for nuclear weapons, that's got to go. I think we need to look at their chemical and biological weapons programs as well. The president's going to raise other issues, the Japanese abductees, the South Korean citizens who were kidnapped.
Talking about trust but verify. All right. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who's been meeting with Kim Jong-un, he met him twice. He's also laying out some of the details about a possible plan for the North Korean and the Korean Peninsula to literally denuclearize the whole area. It would be amazing if it happened. Watch this.
This will be Americans coming in, private sector Americans, not the U.S. taxpayer. Private sector Americans coming in to help build out the energy grid. They need enormous amounts of electricity in North Korea. To work with them to develop infrastructure, all the things that the North Korean people need, the capacity for American agriculture to support North Korea so they can eat meat and have healthy lives. Those are the kind of things that if we get what it is the president has demanded, the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of North Korea, that the American people will offer in spades. Our eyes are wide open with respect to the risks, but it is our fervent hope that Chairman Kim wants to make a strategic change in the direction for his country and his people. And if he's prepared to do that, President Trump is prepared to assure that this can be a successful transition.
All right. Now, the key words of Secretary of State Pompeo are complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. President Trump isn't just going to take Kim Jong-un at his word, in other words, like Bill Clinton did with his father, Kim Jong-il. If Kim Jong-un wants the crushing sanctions to be lifted and our military off his coast again, well, if he doesn't want that, then he's going to have to prove that he has completely destroyed his nuclear capability. This is what Ronald Reagan's policy of trust but verify means in action. All right, we're also following another developing story tonight from the Hill's John Solomon, that he'll join us in a little bit. This is getting serious attention. Look at the Drudge Report today, because it is a massive, huge deal. Here's the headline. Mueller may have a conflict, and it leads directly to a Russian oligarch. You can't make this up. And according to John Solomon, in 2009, then FBI Director Robert Mueller was directly involved in a plan with a Russian billionaire to rescue, by the way, and I don't oppose this, I will be clear, I'll explain later, to literally rescue an FBI agent and a CIA agent. His name was Robert Levinson. He's been missing now for 11 years. He was captured in Iran. In exchange for this, the billionaire was willing to spend $20 million of his own money as part of this operation, and he was given a special visa to enter the United States. Now, the difficult part comes out of the hypocrisy, because it turns out this is the same Russian billionaire the special counsel is now investigating in the Russian probe, but they kind of kept his name out of the indictment of Paul Manafort. Alan Dershowitz, Jonathan Turley are both telling John Solomon that this previous relationship with Robert Mueller is a massive conflict of interest as it relates to the Mueller probe. We did reach out to the special counsel for a statement, but they don't really like me over there. They didn't comment. Now, John Solomon will join us later with all these details. A stunning development tonight. And yet another setback for Mueller and his corrupt investigation. Get this. Remember, 2 Fridays ago, Judge T.S. Eliot III called out Mueller's probe as nothing more than a witch hunt to get to President Trump, to get to impeachment, to get to some charges brought against the president. Well, another judge is now picking apart Mueller's indictment of those Russian nationals. And tonight we have more incredible information that Mueller's investigation is imploding. And a Russian company that was indicted by the special counsel, remember, Mueller didn't think anyone was going to respond to this, is calling the charges baseless. And in court saying Mueller and his hacks haven't even shown that the company intentionally broke the law. And Law and Crime tonight, it's a website reporting that the attorney for this Russian company, he wants to see Mueller's secret grand jury instructions, which he would have a right to see. And Daily Wire is out with a report saying that the court transcripts, get this, it shows that Mueller indicted a Russian company that didn't exist at the time. And according to the Daily Wire, a lawyer for this company said, Your Honor, I think we're dealing with a situation of the government having indicted the proverbial ham sandwich. That company didn't exist as a legal entity during the time period alleged by the U.S. government. If at some later time they show to me that it does exist or it did exist, well, we would probably represent them. But for purposes of today, no, we don't represent them. Wow. Andy McCarthy has actually quoted as saying from National Review Online, one thing you never want to do is indict in a case that you're not prepared to try. And clearly Mueller's team was not prepared. They were caught flat-footed. And the entire investigation is literally falling apart in a spectacular fashion. And the mainstream media is not telling you any of this. And, of course, the rest of the deep state is also being put on notice tonight as they continue to be exposed. You saw the Wall Street Journal. I was off Friday. Unfortunately, Kim Strassel is raising serious concerns and questions about the possibility the FBI planting a mole inside the Trump campaign. OK, what if it was Hillary? It's a stunning new development, especially in light of the FBI then later helping Hillary when we know it's incontrovertible. The evidence is overwhelming that she committed felonies and crimes and obstructed justice. And by the way, this is something that needs to be fully investigated. And that means the Department of Justice needs to get off their ass and send over all those subpoenaed documents. But it fits right into a pattern that's been playing out. We have seen severe FISA abuses, the FBI lying to multiple judges about the Clinton bought and paid for dossier with Russian sources paid for by and worked on by a foreign national. They got warrants to spy on a member of the Trump campaign. Then, of course, the rampant, ridiculous 350% uptick by the Obama administration in unmasking during the 2016 election year. Then we've got the criminal leaking that took place. Michael Flynn is only one example. His name was unmasked and then leaked raw intelligence to the news media. And, of course, that ended up in the case where we are now. It is beyond disturbing, and it's why this deep state, if we care about the rule of law, equal justice under the law, equal application of the law, and our Constitution, these people need to be held accountable. And some members of Congress are trying to do that. Senator Chuck Grassley is now demanding answers about Comey's conflicting testimony over Michael Flynn's interview with FBI agents. Remember, Comey told Congress he didn't think that Michael Flynn lied. But that's what Mueller ended up charging Flynn with. And then remember, this information, that was something that Rod Rosenstein and others at the DOJ, they fought like hell to keep redacted in the name of national security when clearly it had nothing to do with national security. And like they've been slow walking, redacting in the name of national security, they're just stonewalling. And the DOJ is deploying one tactic after another to try and prevent Congress from finding out the truth about how corrupt this Russia investigation has been from day one and the abuse of the FISA laws have been, and, of course, putting the fix in for Hillary Clinton. Now, the House Intel Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, then Trey Gowdy, they're now saying the DOJ is trying to discredit their investigation by using anonymous sources to attack a GOP staffer who helped expose surveillance abuses. This is pathetic. If our government uses the powerful tools of intelligence and turns them on us, we don't have a country anymore. And it proves that the DOJ clearly is hiding something. Rod Rosenstein begged Paul Ryan not to turn over information about FISA abuses. Instead of turning over the documents, Congress has a constitutional role of oversight. They're just attacking the congressman. All right, finally tonight, a revealing report from the Washington Compost. Trump's successes are so undeniable at this point that even the liberal mainstream media is struggling to deny and spin them. And now Democrats are really scared because their 17-point generic midterm congressional ballot lead has now disappeared. Even fake news CNN has a poll within the margin of error. And that's 1 point in a Reuters poll. And there's a reason that President Trump is racking up win after win after win on the economy, on foreign policy. Just look at the major accomplishments in the last week or two. You know, we secured the release of 3 American hostages. We didn't pay for it. We captured the top 5 most wanted ISIS leaders. We ended the horrific Iranian nuclear deal. We set a date for a summit with little Rocket Man in North Korea. The African-American unemployment rate is in an all-time low in this country. 14 states have an all-time low. Hispanic unemployment at an all-time low. Women in the workplace at an all-time low. And overall unemployment is at an all-time low since 2000. And the CNN poll shows that we have optimism in this country at an 11-year high. The Atlanta Federal Reserve is forecasting second quarter economic growth at a whopping 4.1%. The midterms are going to be about President Trump's accomplishments, not this false, all this noise, all this narrative that the Democrats and your corrupt media have been pushing.